Y'all not gonna believe this. I went on my first date with a guy named Joe last night. I had such a wild time. Let me tell you, you're not gonna believe this. It turned out fantastic. Yes, girls, guys, it turned out fantastic. I had such a nice time. There was a scary little moment at the door. When we got there, this restaurant was packed. I mean, I didn't know if they were giving something away in there or what, because that parking lot was loaded with people. I ended up parking at the business next door and walking over there. And I got up close to the door, and there was people all outside and people all in the lobby. You could see that there was, it was going to be a long wait. And I said, looked in my purse and thought when I got there, I'd locked my car and stuff. And I thought, oh, I forgot my phone. I'm going to have to hike all the way back across this parking lot in that next field so I can go get my phone. And luckily, I found it in my purse. And there was a lady watching me. She said, you okay? Because I just stopped in my tracks. And, and I'm having this whole, thing in my head. And I said, no, I found my phone. I said, I thought I was going to have to hike back across this place to go get my phone. And she started laughing. She said, oh, it's been a long wait here. I said, yeah. I said, my friend is here waiting. Now, hopefully it won't be too long. So I texted him and I said, I'm here. I'm at the door. Where are you? Because there's a lot of people everywhere. I mean, really, it was like an outdoor party. And he texted me back and he said this. He said, I'm inside next to the hostess stand and I have on a black hat and I'm the only one in here with a black hat. And I just went, oh, no. And I thought, well, maybe we're here now. So I went in and I forced my way through the crowd and the little children that were there because they were having a party or something for a family. And so there was a big group. Everybody had 2 kids with them, and so those little ones everywhere, knee high. So I weed through that and I get to him. He stands up and he says, oh, he said, it's so glad to see you again. Now, he and I had met very briefly a few months ago, but I hadn't, I couldn't have picked him out of a crowd. Honestly, I couldn't have. And so he stood up, he knew right who I was, and he gave me a hug and said, oh, I'm so glad you made it. He said, it shouldn't be too long. He said, I've actually been here about a half hour. He said, so I knew the place would be full. I wanted to get our seat, didn't want you to have to wait that long. I said, oh, and I thought, well, isn't he charming to go ahead and think ahead like that? And I thought, well, that's a good red check mark there. That's a good, not a red flag, but a green flag, right? Then we got seated. We sat there and talked for a few minutes, and the folks around us, like anywhere else, if you talk in public, everyone else, they got nothing to do but mind your business. So, and that's okay. It's okay, because Lord knows I do it. And so the folks near us, he and I are talking. We're talking about some world traveling that he's done, some places I've traveled to overseas. We're sitting there talking about that. And we were actually we just clicked, having a conversation. And then these strangers got involved in our conversation. And he and I, we just played right along and just flowed with it. There was no uncomfortable, no awkward, like we knew each other, like we knew how to manage these folks being in our conversation and joining them in, but just a little bit, And then one of the staff members there is a gal that I know absolutely adore, matter of fact. And I didn't know she worked there. She said it was a new job for her. And so she came over and gave me a big hug. And that's always nice to see someone out, that knows you and thinks that much of you. So I got my little hug from her. And then on the way to the table, somebody else that I know, not from TikTok, just I know in my regular life, seen me and stopped. And we got to the table. He said, you're quite a little popular girl. I said, I am. I said, I apologize. These are my friends I've known for years. They all worked at a different restaurant, and I used to go there. I know that. I said, they're lovely people, and we sat down. So we started talking, and he said, you need to see the menu. I said, no, I know, I know what I'd like. And he said, well, me too. So without looking at the menu, the waitress comes. She asked what we'd have to drink. And so we ordered, with no alcohol. We just ordered, because he's got a little drive. He got about a 45-minute drive. And, of course, I've been working all day. I don't need to be drinking no alcohol. And I'd had a bit of a rough day. I didn't want any alcohol making my mouth run more than it should, because I did have kind of a hectic day. Well, it wasn't hectic. It just was aggravating. We'll just say that. So then we ordered our food. We ordered the exact same meal without even because the folks at the other table were then talking to my date, Joe, when I was giving the waitress my order. And then when he gave his order, he ordered the exact same thing. And I just smiled. And he said, the waitress ordered, he said, "What did you decide on?" He said, "I'm sorry, I missed what you ordered." I said, "You don't believe this." And he said, "What?" I said, "I ordered the exact same thing as you did." He said, "Well, how'd you know what I was going to order?" I said, "I didn't." And he started laughing. He said, "We're a lot alike." He said, "I can tell we're a lot alike." I said, "I think we are." And we got a kick out of that. We talked some more about some business that he and I both were familiar with overseas. And we had a nice chat about some different places we've seen here in the United States and visited. You know, and I love to always tell about the great places I've been, like Temple Square and things here in the U.S. that I visited that I was very impressed with. And so we talked about that. And the conversation just flowed, girls. It just flowed. Now, afterwards, I have to say that when I got in the car and headed home, well, I talked to one of my gal pals. I called her, "Okay, I'm leaving." It all went good, right? And she said, "Well, you know, did you get little butterflies in your bed?" I said, "I don't know." Because we just instantly connected like we've known each other. So I don't know. I didn't get that, but the comfort level, the comfort zone was out of this world. I mean, just absolutely clicked. So I don't know. But so I promise you, this gentleman and I are going to stay friends at the very least. And of course, at the end of the meal, there was no discussion. He offered to pay. He said, "Oh no," he said, "How do I do that?" And of course, then we had a good joke about how we now work at the steakhouse, because you know how like the Walmart checkout, you got to check yourself out. Well, here at this restaurant, you also have to check yourself out. And it's a nice restaurant, but you do have to check yourself out at the table. So we fiddled around with that until we said that we want to know what night the company Christmas party was, because we was going to come to the Texas Roadhouse Christmas party now that we work there. We're the checkout girl and guy. And we had a really nice time. Y'all see, sometimes dating, it's not about the fails. It's about the wins, okay? It's like going to the grocery store, buying a melon. You're not going to just pick the first melon up and throw it in your wagon. You're going to pick it up and thump the end of it and see how it sounds, see if that's the right one. And that's what we've been doing with dating. And I think it's a real possibility that we found the right guy.